You're about to hear something that was never meant to reach your ears. Once it does, there's no going back. This may feel like sleep, but it's the kind that wakes you up in ways you didn't know were possible. You're not supposed to remember this. Not this place, not this feeling, not this truth. You were trained to forget it the moment you were born. All your life, there's been a hum in the background. You feel it, but don't know where it comes from, like the low vibration of a machine. Buried under the ground, constantly running. A system designed not to serve you, but to shape you. What you're hearing right now isn't just a video. It's a crack in the glass, and you're about to slip through it. For centuries, the ruling class has depended on one thing: to stay in power, your distraction, and sleep. Sleep was their greatest weapon, not the kind you do in bed. The kind where your soul is awake, but your mind is on autopilot. Scrolling, obeying, consuming, forgetting. But there was a time, a very specific time, when a certain group of people realized how easy it was to manipulate entire empires, not through force, but through forgetting. Forget the past. Forget your blood. Forget your voice. This is the part where most turn back. But you're still here. That says something. It's not that you don't want rest. It's that your spirit wants the truth, even if it arrives wearing the mask of boring history. And here's the truth. They hide in footnotes and margins. Entire civilizations have been wiped from memory. Not by accident, but by design. Empires that disappeared without a sound. Technologies that didn't fail, but were forbidden. Languages erased. Maps edited. Names changed. Knowledge sterilized. You've been told history is slow, sleepy, irrelevant. That's the lie. Real history, the kind we're about to enter, is dangerous. You've already started forgetting what you were doing. Now, let's go deeper. They told you history is dead. But what if I told you it's not just alive, it's watching you? There's a city you've never heard of. Not because it never existed, but because its memory was surgically removed from every book, archive, and tongue that ever spoke it. This city was older than Babylon, more technologically advanced than Rome, and more dangerous, not because of weapons, but because of what its people remembered. They called it Caradar, the city that refused to sleep. It wasn't large. No pyramids, no golden palaces. But beneath its dirt, in its stone, in the way its people walked and spoke, was something that terrified kings. The people of Caradar believed that forgetting was the greatest crime of all. So they passed down memories, like fire, uncensored, unedited, unapproved. They didn't worship gods. They worshipped memory. They could tell you who they were, 7 generations back. Not through DNA tests, through story, through ritual, through symbol. Every child was taught, if you forget, they win. And then one day, they vanished. No war, no plague, no collapse, just silence. Even the ground where Caradar once stood was renamed, repaved, and repurposed. The language died. The alphabet banned. The songs erased. Not forgotten, erased. But the strangest thing, the name Caradar still appears in one place. Not on maps, not in stone, but whispered in the nightmares of children from villages miles away. Children who've never heard the name, but still cry out in the night, "Don't take my memories." They don't know why they say it, but they say it. The system is good at rewriting, but some memories leak through, like oil through concrete. That's what this video is, a leak, a drip of a forgotten memory they tried to bury. And you're remembering it now, aren't you? You feel it in your chest, in your teeth, in your blood. You're not watching boring history. You're remembering something that never wanted to be forgotten, and if you think that was strange, wait until you hear what happened underneath Caradar. We're not just waking up. We're going under. Above, they lived with memory. Below, they buried something they swore never to speak of again. Beneath Caradar was not a sewer, not a catacomb, but a chamber. 12 stone doors, no hinges, no handles, each etched with a symbol, older than cuneiform, older than Egyptian glyphs. Symbols that don't just represent sounds, they trigger something. When first discovered in the 1800s by a European excavation team, they thought they'd found a tomb, but no bodies, no artifacts. Only silence, and walls so smooth they couldn't have been carved by Bronze Age tools. Even modern laser cutters couldn't replicate them. They tried dynamite. Nothing cracked. They tried acid. The walls absorbed it. The lead archaeologist, a man named Francois Delandy, began having visions. He recorded them in a hidden journal, now sealed in a French archive, under restricted access. I've seen it, and what it describes will undo everything you think you know about ancient civilization. He wrote, "It is not a tomb, it is a machine, but not one of gears, one of memory. Every stone remembers, not what was done, but what was meant." After that, his entire team vanished. Official records say they succumbed to exposure, but their families were never notified. No graves, no funerals, just erasure. The site was declared unstable and reburied within months. But here's what you weren't told. Just before the chamber was sealed, a single photograph was taken by a French cartographer named Lucien Ardent. It shows one of the doors. Partially opened, behind it, is not darkness, but a room lit from within. No torches, no electricity. Just light, cold, white, and humming like it was alive. That photo was smuggled out, copied, hidden, and every person who has ever seen the original has disappeared, not all at once. One by one, some turn up suicided, some vanish mid-flight. Some, like Lucien, were simply erased from every government system. No passport, no family, no record. Gone. This isn't mythology. This is a history they wish was mythed, because truth is far more dangerous, and this is only the surface of the machine, ready for what lies inside. The room behind the door didn't just hold light. It held something far more dangerous. A language not meant to be spoken, but to be felt. The walls were covered in symbols, thousands of them, but they weren't arranged like writing. Not left to right, top to bottom. They were laid out like a circuit, a living diagram. And when viewed directly, people described a feeling of melting. Not physically, mentally, like their minds were being rewired just by seeing the shapes. Lucien Ardent's final notes, scribbled frantically on the back of a torn map, said something strange. These are not words, they're commands, not for machines, but for humans. Commands for what? Behavior, obedience. Amnesia. The ancients of Caradar had discovered something the world still doesn't understand. That language shapes biology, not metaphorically, literally. The wrong sound, the wrong symbol, can overwrite a human's sense of self. Erase memory, instill fear, or worse, install obedience that feels like choice. You were born into this system. You were taught the alphabet, but never told it was an operating system. You speak it, write it, consume it, thinking it's yours. But every letter was chosen for effect. You ever wonder why certain letters feel sharper? Why certain phrases just feel right? It's not art, it's engineering. The chamber beneath Caradar didn't contain treasure. It contained the source code for how the elites have always controlled the masses. Not through violence, not through law, but through the careful engineering of memory and perception. And here's the horrifying part. This wasn't their invention. It was a relic they found, older than them, older than any known civilization. They didn't build the chamber. They just discovered it, and they tried to seal it again, because they knew anyone who truly understands these symbols becomes immune to control, immune to programming, immune to fear. That's why you were told history is boring, because if you really paid attention, you'd start noticing the codes, the triggers, the cracks, and once you see them, you can never unsee them. You are not a passive mind. You are a system being hacked, and they've been doing it since long before you were born. The symbols of Caradar didn't die in that chamber. They metastasized into modern life. You think ancient symbols stay buried in ruins. No, they migrate, they evolve, they hide in plain sight. Look closely at corporate logos, the biggest ones, the ones you see every day without thinking, the ones that feel safe, professional, trusted. That feeling isn't by accident. Their designs are not based on marketing genius. They're based on resonance. Let me explain. In 1957, A linguist named Dr. Heinrich Arlo discovered what he called perceptual glyph echoes. He noticed certain ancient symbols, especially from Caradar replicas, triggered identical neural patterns to those activated by common modern logos. He ran studies, brain scans, focus groups. People shown these symbols reported emotions that were not their own. Calm, obedience, comfort, confusion, compliance. They felt them, but couldn't explain why. The experiment was shut down. Arlo was discredited, but a year later, he was hired as a consultant for 5 of the world's largest branding agencies. Coincidence? No. The glyphs of Caradar became templates for behavioral design. Look again at the most minimal logos, the ones made of simple lines, arcs, shapes. They are not minimalist. They are efficient. They are Caradar disguised. Take a major credit card, or a major fast food chain, or a major tech operating system. Peel back their designs. Overlay them with the chamber circuit. They match not perfectly, but intentionally. They don't need to be obvious. They just need to trigger. This is the language of control. Subconscious, repeating, hidden in signage, in packaging, in interfaces, every time you click the same symbol, touch the same screen, trace the same lines. You're not just interacting. You're reinforcing the program. You're reminded who you are, or more accurately, who you're not allowed to be. And here's the part they fear most. If enough men awake, alert, watching, see through the pattern, the symbols break. They lose power, because they only work when hidden. So if your eyes feel heavy now, it's not sleep. It's resistance from the system. That means you're getting close. They called it the eraser. A single symbol, buried, banned, then brought back under another name. Of all the glyphs in the chamber, one was always drawn last, always alone, always with a shaking hand. It didn't have a name in there. Language, just a function, to make people forget who they are. Not just memories. Identity, this symbol, when spoken or carved in a specific pattern, could do something no empire, no army, no religion could. Make a man forget that he was ever free. Not convinced. Look into the archives of the CIA's MKTRO program, if you can find the real files. Not the sanitized ones. You'll discover something that was never discussed publicly. Project Sympath, a sub-operation focused, not on drugs or torture, but on shape recognition and identity dissolution. They tested simple geometric glyphs on test subjects. Volunteers, prisoners, soldiers. When shown this particular shape, a twisted arc intersecting a line at a mathematically impossible angle, the subjects reported, "I feel like I've lost myself. I can't remember what I came in for. I don't feel real." Sound familiar? Now ask yourself, why do you see almost that exact shape in modern media? In loading screens? In airline safety cards? In mandatory public signage? Why do your eyes slip past it every time? But your body tenses, your breath slows, and your thoughts fade. Because it's still working. The eraser was never destroyed. It was REBRANDED. Now it lives in design schools, in universal symbols, in public architecture. They say it's about clarity, efficiency. But clarity for who? Let me ask you, when was the last time you felt entirely yourself? Not influenced, not reacting, not performing, just you. That's what this symbol takes. But here's the secret they tried to bury. What can be encoded, can be decoded. There's a countersymbol, not a weapon. A mirror, it doesn't overwrite. It reflects. Ancient initiates of Caradar painted it in blood on cave walls, not for others, for themselves, to remember, to redash a line. In exactly 9 minutes, I'll reveal that symbol. But only if you're still here. Because what's coming next will test if your mind is still your own, or if the eraser already got to you. It happened once, just once. A broadcast that slipped past the censors. A forgotten glyph flashed on screen. And for 7 seconds, millions felt something they couldn't explain. March 14, 1983. A local news station in Sacramento, California. Evening broadcast was typical. Weather, sports. Then a static pulse hit the screen, barely noticeable. less than a second long. But when slowed down to 240 frames per second, you see it. A symbol dot, one line, three bends, a closing loop, just open enough to confuse the eye. They called it a technical glitch, but what happened next wasn't technical. 911 calls surged across the county. People reporting, "I forgot where I was. I feel like I lost time. I had to write my name down, because I couldn't remember it." Hospitals logged 44 non-fatal seizures, 8 car accidents, a blackout at the university's psychology department, where the feed had been playing during a test. But here's the part they erased. A retired linguist, watching from a senior care facility, recognized the symbol, not from any language known today, but from a tablet he'd studied in Morocco decades earlier. An artifact never made public. His name was Dr. Eric Volman. 3 days after the broadcast, he was found dead in his room. Cause of death: natural, but his notebooks all missing. His archived research misplaced the artifact, lost in transit. But here's what they didn't take: a single quote from a letter he'd mailed a week before. The symbol is not just visual, it's energetic. It doesn't speak to the eyes, it speaks to the memory beneath memory. The memory of who we are before the programming. The network never acknowledged the glitch. The footage was pulled, buried in analog archives. You can't find it online, not the real version. But I've seen it, and the feeling it creates. It's like being unplugged from a simulation you didn't know you were in. It doesn't show you anything. It just removes the fog, and that's what they fear most. Because once the fog lifts, you don't obey, you don't consume, you don't forget, you remember, not history, not dates, but yourself, your unmodified self. And that's when you become dangerous. The symbol didn't vanish, it went commercial. And it's been in your life closer than you'd dare to believe. Take a breath. Look down at what you're wearing. What's in your hand? What's glowing in your lap, or buzzing in your pocket? Think about your favorite brand. The one you trust. The one that feels like you. Now ask yourself, did you choose that brand? Or did something choose for you? Let's go back to 1998, the launch year of a no global tech company. Their original logo, clean, innocent, but hidden in the negative space, when rotated, is a version of the GLYPH. Not exact, but close enough to trigger. What does that company make? Phones, operating systems, voice assistants. They don't just sell tools. They sell interfaces, behavioral channels that guide your attention, your routine, your identity. Think that was an accident? In 2004, a fashion designer in Paris released a line of minimalist streetwear. No brand name, just a stitched symbol. Guess what symbol? The looped triangle, a direct derivative of Caradar's third circuit. It became a cult hit. People reported feeling powerful while wearing it, more confident, more controlled. But that's not empowerment. That's programming, masquerading as strength. Then came the music videos. Quick flashes, geometric transitions. The symbol in the background, never centered, but always present. And the kids, they called it a vibe, but couldn't explain the unease that followed. You ever wonder why certain objects feel safe? Why certain brands feel like home? Because they're laced with glyphs, Caradar reforged for the modern consumer. But it goes deeper. Check your credit card, the chips, the new holograms. Somewhere, buried in the layers, is an echo of the symbol, not readable to the eye, but registered by your subconscious. They call it design. We call it ritual. Every interaction is a micro-ceremony. Every brand allegiance is a minor oath. And every time you return to it, scroll it, wear it, you're reinforcing the loop. Here's what they'll never say. If they can hide one symbol in the world around you, how many others have already taken root inside you? You've been marked. And that mark isn't just visual. It's behavioral. But now that you see it, the spell weakens. Every virus creates resistance, and in the shadow of Caradar, a brotherhood formed, not to rule, but to erase the glyph before it ruled everything else. They called themselves the Onyx Circle, not a cult, not a religion, a resistance cell, bound not by belief, but by memory. They believed Caradar's glyphs weren't just symbols, they were spells. Not magic, but ancient psychological warfare. Coded disassembly of human identity. Their mission: track the glyph's mutations across empires, decode its evolution, and break the pattern before it completed itself. They believed in a terrifying idea: history doesn't repeat. It self-replicates through language. The Onyx Circle operated in silence for centuries. They appeared in places history forgot, among burned scrolls in Alexandria, in the margins of banned translations during the Inquisition, inside secret guilds of cartographers who drew maps no one was allowed to see. They were the ghostwriters of forbidden books, the unmarked graves beneath fallen towers, the unknown scribes who vanished just before truth could spread. And in 1746, they made their final move. They constructed a device, not a weapon, a resonator, built to emit the inverse frequency of the glyph. The location: a mountain monastery in what is now eastern Slovakia. No roads, no name, no records, only stone and silence. The device pulsed once, and in that moment, every man within a 9-mile radius reported the same dream that night. A door opened inside me, and the voice that entered wasn't mine. But then, something happened. The pulse didn't just cancel the glyph. It attracted it as if the symbol, the virus, knew it was under attack. Within days, the monastery burned. Stone melted, ash fell upward. Eyewitnesses saw letters hovering in the smoke. Only one scribe survived. His final words before dying of a brain hemorrhage. We woke it. After that, the Onyx Circle dissolved, not out of failure, but fear. They realized the glyph couldn't be destroyed. It could only be remembered differently, which means you right now, listening to this, you're part of their last attempt, their final design. Because memory, when shared, becomes resistance, and what comes next? The symbol of reversal. But before I show you, comment below right now, and type this phrase twice: I remember. Before the forgetting, wants to see who else is awake, and wants to tell the algorithm, I choose truth over sleep. The reversal isn't a weapon. It's not loud. It doesn't scream, or shatter, or burn. It whispers, gently, through a melody designed to outlive empires. The Onyx Circle failed to destroy the glyph, but they left something behind. Not a device, not a document, a song. It was passed down secretly, hidden in an ancient cradle tune once sung in the mountains of Eastern Europe. Scholars catalogued it as a lullaby Drahomira's sleep, thought to originate in the 1700s, but it wasn't for children. It was a frequency container, a melody structured to encode a reverse pattern of Karadar's glyph. Let that sink in. The resistance hid their most powerful tool in music. Why? Because sound bypasses language. It speaks directly to the nervous system. It remembers what your mind forgets. And this lullaby, it doesn't just soothe, it realigns. Here's how it works. The melody follows a non-Western scale, 1. That doesn't resolve the way modern music does. Instead of tension and release, it loops, softly, imperfectly. The same way memory does. People who've heard the full version, uncut, uncompressed, unmanipulated, report strange experiences. I felt like I'd met myself again. I remembered a version of me before school, before rules, before shame. It wasn't a song. It was a mirror. The original sheet music. Destroyed in 1941 during a random fire at the Prague Conservatory, but fragments survive hidden in field recordings by ethnomusicologists who didn't know what they'd captured. I've reconstructed part of it, not from notes, from resonance, and in the next chapter, I'll let you hear it. But here's the warning. It doesn't feel like clarity. It feels like undoing. The first time I heard it, I cried for hours. Not from sadness, from recognition. I remembered something I never knew I'd forgotten. The melody isn't magic. It doesn't change the world. It reminds you that you can, because the glyph's greatest lie was that you are something to be shaped. This song reminds you, you were whole before they touched you. And when enough people remember that, the glyph fractures, not from violence, from irrelevance. It loses grip when you no longer need it to know who you are, and you're almost ready to hear it. The melody survived, but the man who played it did not. His name was Klaus Merton, a German ethnomusicologist with a background in acoustic engineering and ancient religious harmonics. He wasn't looking for conspiracies. He was looking for patterns. In 1972, he traveled through eastern Slovakia, collecting dying lullabies from remote villages. Most were forgotten fragments, half-melodies, breathless hymns whispered by the very old and the very lonely, until one woman, 292 years old, blind since birth, sang something that made him stop breathing, a lullaby, but not like any he'd ever heard. 6 notes, then 7, then 6 again. The rhythm defied logic. It didn't comfort, it unlocked. She said her grandmother taught it to her, said it wasn't for babies, it was for remembering. Merton recorded it on a reel-to-reel tape, logged it under field recording number 47A, and flew home. But that tape never reached the archive. It vanished. What we know comes from his personal journal, smuggled out by a colleague before the authorities came. Merton described how, after listening to the playback late one night, he experienced something he couldn't explain. My body was still, but something ancient inside me was screaming, not in fear, in grief, like it had been trapped. And now, it knew the way out. He reported vivid dreams, not surreal ones. Historical, he saw the Caradar chamber, the glyphs, the scribe who opened the 12th door. The moment the first eraser symbol was drawn, he began sketching them in his notebooks, obsessively. Then, he made a mistake. He digitized the melody, just 62 seconds. He uploaded it to a university server under a codename, SL47A. No title, no tags, no context, but within 48 hours, the server was pulled offline. His apartment was ransacked. His funding was revoked. He vanished. Official story. He took his own life, but no body was found. No farewell letter. No fingerprints. No trace. Only one item remained in his emptied apartment, a handwritten card taped to the wall. It said, "I remembered before the forgetting." Yes, the same phrase you just commented. That's not coincidence. That's connection, and you're about to hear what he heard. But once you do, the glyph will react. You'll feel it in your sleep, in your bones, in the algorithms trying to pull your attention back. That's how you'll know it's working. There are lullabies, and there are locks disguised as lullabies. What Klaus Merton uncovered wasn't just a melody, it was a mnemonic device, not to help children sleep, but to erase ancestral memory in adults. The sequence he recorded followed a distinct structure, 6 tones that matched the vibrational frequency of the pineal gland, 7 tones that disrupted verbal recall encoding, then 6 tones, again tuned to mimic theta wave interference. 6, 6, 7, 6. Like a key pattern inserted beneath the conscious mind. We've seen this before, not just in Slovakia, but in Mesopotamia. In the Nippur tablets, priests described sleep songs that must be sung before ceremonial forgetting. In Egypt, the same. Ancient funeral rites included chants that weren't for mourning, they were for unremembering. One hieroglyph for years was recently corrected. They thought it meant peaceful passing, but its true meaning. Let him forget what he saw beyond the veil. This isn't just myth. This is neurological warfare waged on memory. Memory, not stored in the brain, but embedded in epigenetic frequency. Because what we call ancestral trauma is also ancestral awareness. And if you keep that awareness alive, you resist the programming now. Here's the horrifying part. That same 676 structure is embedded in modern notification sounds. Yes, the beeps, the chimes, the tones that make you look down at your phone, then forget why you looked in the first place. They train your dopamine loop. But more importantly, they interrupt neural threading, right at the moment your inner awareness tries to surface, a subconscious chokehold. Now think about it. Why do almost all devices use the same melodic cadence? Why do you feel anxiety when it goes off? And why does silence feel so threatening now? Because silence is the only place the original you can speak. Merton wrote in his final entry, "I didn't discover a song. I found the muzzle that was keeping our ancestors quiet. So, we reverse it. No music, no tone, only breath and pause. Breathe in for 6, hold for 7, Exhale, 4, 6. Again, 6-7-6. Not to forget, but to awaken. This isn't meditation. It's counter-hypnosis. The deeper we go, the more they'll try to pull you back. And now that you know the pattern, you'll start hearing it everywhere. There was a scroll buried beneath a mountain monastery in Yunnan, China, wrapped in black silk, sealed with bone ash, marked with a warning, not for the living, not for the loud. It was discovered in 1891, but never made it into museums. Instead, it passed through the hands of two secret societies, one imperial, the other ecclesiastical. Why? Because inside were diagrams, ritual diagrams, meticulously painted in blood ochre, and next to them, written in an unbroken script of Aramaic and Old Chinese, were instructions for something the scroll called the ritual of perpetual amnesia. Unlike hypnotism, unlike suppression, this was surgical forgetting, targeting collective memory. Here's the terrifying part. This ritual had been performed at the site every 72 years, for over 1,000 years. Always on the winter solstice. Always by 13 masked monks. The ritual required three things. A. Symbol. Something ancient that people once feared and worshipped. A. Sound, one that mimicked the cry of a newborn goat. A sacrifice, not of life, but of truth, because what the monks were trained to erase wasn't stories. It was entire timelines, entire versions of human history. It was a memory wipe, so complete that the scroll itself warns. Those who try to recall will bleed from the eyes. Not metaphorically. Eyewitnesses claimed that researchers who spent more than a few hours studying the diagrams began to suffer spontaneous hemorrhages, not because of a curse, but because the patterns embedded within the scroll triggered neurovascular collapse. Visual language as a weapon. And here's what will ruin sleep for anyone who dares to understand. Every 72 years, this ritual isn't just repeated in China. Versions of it show up in Rome, Peru, Somalia, and the Ozarks. Different names, same numbers, same intention. Erase the deeper thread. You weren't meant to know that. Civilizations are not linear. They're cyclical traps. And when too many awaken, within the same cycle, something or someone hits reset. The scroll ends with one phrase, written across the bottom in scorched ink. Those who remember become enemies of the dream. Let that settle, because this is not a dream. It's just the first moment you finally woke up inside it. There's something strange about cathedrals. Have you ever stood inside one and felt smaller than you should? Not just in size, but in importance. Like the building is watching you, not the other way around. That's not by accident. From Chartres in France, to St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, to La Sagrada Familia in Spain, across continents, across cultures. Sacred geometry repeats, same ratios, same echoes, same shadows. But why? Because these structures weren't just built for worship. They were built as resonance chambers, instruments that play the human soul like a tuning fork. Let me explain. Architects aligned these buildings, not just by compass, but by celestial coordinates. Sunlight hits stained glass at precise angles. On specific days, chambers beneath the floor carry sound in inhuman ways, echoes that bounce, but never fade, and the whispers those walls carry. They're not always from this time. Here's what's darker. Many of these churches and temples are built on top of older ruins, pagan sites, burial grounds, forgotten altars, and beneath some of them, you'll find rooms. Rooms not listed on any floor plan. No doors, no windows. Just stone circles and carved spirals, older than the buildings themselves. Why? Because centuries ago, the elite realized something powerful. If you can control where people speak to God, you can control what they think God says back. And so, they embedded mnemonic traps into the architecture. When a person chants inside certain domes, specific tones activate hypnotic resonance patterns, not imagined. Measured. MRI scans show shifts in the prefrontal cortex when certain Gregorian tones echo within those walls. A neurological lullaby, soft, sacred, and subduing. This was never about faith, it was about frequency. Because if you can modulate someone's spiritual vibration, you don't need to burn books or wage wars. You just need to make them feel peaceful in their prison. And then, one day, that man walks out of the cathedral, and the bars of the cage follow him. Invisible, permanent, accepted. And yet, if you chant the wrong note, the forbidden syllable, once carved into the forbidden altars, the resonance shatters the veil, and for a moment, you hear the building scream. In 1952, something unholy happened. A Vatican emissary stepped off a plane in Langley, Virginia, uninvited, unrecorded, UNACKNOLED. Waiting for him was a group of men from a branch of the CIA, so buried in secrecy, even most agents didn't know it existed. Its codename, Project Ave. Maria, the goal. Not surveillance. Not intelligence. Spiritual weaponry. You see, after World War II, the Allies didn't just race for rocket scientists. They fought a silent war for esoteric engineers. Men who studied sound, like others studied bullets. Men who'd learned how to bend belief with frequency. And what they discovered wasn't myth. It was mechanical by mapping the tonal ranges of Gregorian chants and embedding them into carrier waves. They created something terrifying, the God pulse. Imagine this, a low-frequency beam, broadcast through underground fiber or over AM radio bands, undetectable by normal means. And yet, it could induce feelings of reverence, obedience, guilt, even hallucinations of angelic visions or divine voices. Entire towns could be made to kneel in one test. In a remote village in South America, a church bell rang, but no bell existed. The villagers dropped to their knees, eyes wide, sobbing in ecstasy. Some claimed they saw light from the sky. Others heard a voice telling them to obey. What they were actually experiencing, a synthetic spiritual hallucination, not heaven. A waveform. The Vatican called it salvific influence. Langley called it subthreshold pacification. Same weapon, different ends. But here's the real twist. They weren't just testing it outwardly, they were using it on their own people. Inside military barracks, inside seminaries, inside homes. They wanted to know, could this sound make a man betray his God, his nation, his own child? The answer, yes, and eagerly. Because once your mind is calibrated to an artificial God, you won't need chains. You'll build the prison yourself, and love it. But here's the part no one ever talks about. Every man exposed to this pulse eventually snaps. Something inside breaks quietly at first. A light dims, and over time, they start to feel like something's missing. But they don't know what. Just a low hum in the back of the mind. A shadow of a voice that isn't quite gone. Beneath the marble veins of Washington, D.C., past the polished halls of power. Light chambers, never mapped, never lit by natural light. Not bunkers, not storage, altars. They call it the labyrinth, a network of subterranean sanctuaries constructed during the Cold War, under the guise of continuity of government, infrastructure. But here's the truth. They weren't built to survive a nuclear war. They were built to survive a spiritual one. At their heart is a circular stone room, 66 feet in diameter, lined with obsidian tiles. In the center, an altar of white marble, inlaid with copper wiring and gold-leafed sigils, ancient ones, predating even the first Catholic rites. It's not religious in any traditional sense. It's resonant, when high-frequency tones are played, ones that don't register on consumer devices. The very air in the room begins to pulse. The body doesn't just hear it, it responds. Heart rate syncs, breathing slows. Thoughts, ... Quiet. It creates a neurological silence, allowing the handler, yes, there's always a handler, to implant core ideological programming. One subject, a senator, entered this room to meditate. When he emerged, he changed his vote. Not once, but every time. He believed it was his idea. Another, a whistleblower, described a sensation of God watching from inside me. Then he vanished. No press, no family statement, gone. You see, these chambers weren't designed to protect freedom. They were designed to reshape it, one man at a time. Over the years, several powerful men have made routine visits, not for briefings, not for prayer, but for tuning. Because the elites don't just want loyalty. They want harmonic allegiance. a devotion that cannot be questioned, because the questioner never arises. And here's the darkest part. The blueprints of this system exist in every major capital: London, Berlin, Ottawa, Tel Aviv, Cairo, a hidden network of resonant temples, all connected not by ideology, but by frequency. It is the acoustic architecture of control. And every time you feel a strange calm while watching a leader speak, every time a nation suddenly unites around an unclear cause, ask yourself, is that patriotism, or is that programming? Your memories, the ones you trust, are fragile, not just because time fades them, but because they were engineered to fade. What if I told you entire populations have had memory stolen, not by force, but by design? The earliest record we have is not a record at all, but a gap in history between 536 and 546 AD. Something happened. A global darkness. Crops failed. Snow fell in summer. Civilizations collapsed in silence. The Byzantines wrote of it. The Mayans did too, through symbols of falling skies and the sudden departure of their gods. Chinese court scribes described the sun as a blue-white disk that didn't give heat, but the cause, still debated. Still buried. Volcanoes, they say. Comets, perhaps. But none of those explained the psychological amnesia that followed. Cultures began rewriting their own histories. Entire pantheons. Forgotten rulers, erased. Languages dissolved. And here's the twist, they never told you. Ancient scrolls from Ethiopia, Turkey, and Tibet speak of the year of unvoicing, when the skies roared like trumpets. And people forgot their names. Now modern science has tried to catch up. Neurologists at DARPA tested low-hertz pulses on memory formation in primates. Result: short-term memory disruption, long-term decay, all from sound. Combine that with visual overexposure, constant digital stimulation, and intentional misinformation, and you have the modern cocktail: weaponized forgetting, the real reason you can't recall certain details from your past. Maybe it's not trauma. Maybe it's not aging. Maybe it's because you were trained to forget what made you dangerous, because memory is identity. And if they can fracture memory, they fracture your ability to rebel. Here's a chilling example. A declassified McCulture document outlined a project called Quiet Flame. Its goal: to simulate spiritual rebirth by creating total identity breakdown through sound and isolation. Who funded it? Private religious foundations, pharmaceutical companies, even children's television consultants. Now ask yourself, why would memory erasure techniques be embedded in content meant for kids? Because memory control works best when it starts early. And if you've forgotten how to be dangerous, they've already won. Let's descend deeper now into the one place you thought was truly yours: your dreams. But what if I told you, even your sleep is occupied territory? Because long before modern governments, before the ink of laws or the sound of sermons, ruled by dream, ancient Mesopotamia believed rulers were chosen not by lineage, but by their ability to manipulate dreams. They weren't just temples. They were sleep towers, machines of ritual sleep, designed to expose the human mind to divine command. They believed that in the silence of night, when the body lay still, the soul could be rewritten without resistance. And it didn't stop there. In ancient Egypt, high priests practiced something called temple sleep. The initiate would lie beneath the temple of Serapis or Imhotep, surrounded by oil lamps and whispering voices. Sometimes for days, when they awoke, they were no longer themselves. They had dreamed the will of the gods, and in Rome, the Emperor Hadrian once ordered an entire class of senators to undergo somnium silentium, a ritual of enforced dreaming, fed by poppy fumes and whispered commands in Latin and Greek. Their decisions afterward: predictable, controlled, programmed. Now pause, ask yourself, why do modern institutions invest billions in understanding sleep cycles, REM phases, and dream states? Why is there a military project known as Project Morpheus, aimed at weaponizing lucid dreaming? Why do your dreams seem more chaotic, more fragmented, more surveilled now than ever? Because dream is the final frontier of control. You can resist propaganda. You can question the news. You can close your eyes. But you cannot stop the images that come after the world goes dark, and now. Corporations want that too. Meta and Alphabet have both filed patents for sleep-targeted advertising. Their goal? To implant emotional associations with products during your unconscious cycles. The result? You wake up feeling loyal to something you never chose. They've taken your waking hours. Now they're mining your sleep. We are now entering a place, few ever speak of, a place older than language, deeper than culture, and darker than death. It's called deathless sleep, not a metaphor, not a myth, but a ritual known in hushed fragments passed down in shadows, from ancient empires that no longer have names, in the cryptic texts of the Eleusinian mysteries, in the forbidden scrolls smuggled out of Babylon, in the whispers of Tibet's Black Sky sect. It appears again and again, the death that does not end. This was not just immortality. This was suspended existence asleep, so deep, so sealed, that the soul could be paused, manipulated, even rewritten. Imagine it. A king lies entombed not to rot, but to wait, his body preserved. His consciousness still tethered, drifting in engineered sleep. His soul looping through visions crafted by those he trusted most, or feared most. This wasn't science fiction. This was the pinnacle of occult statecraft. The Egyptians spoke of the Ba and the Ka, the soul and the ego being split at death. But the high priests of Osiris believed they could intervene, that through precise chants, sense, and symbols etched into the tomb's architecture, they could direct the Ba into an eternal feedback loop, self-sustaining dream, encoded with loyalty to the crown. It was a monarchy of the unconscious, and they believed this sleep-bound monarch could still influence the world. From behind the veil, Napoleon. Rumors persist that he underwent a black rite beneath the Great Pyramid during his 1799 expedition, returning white-faced, silent, and convinced he'd been shown the fate of the West in the Himalayas. The monks of the Red Circle whisper of sleepwalkers, figures entombed beneath ice, still dreaming the empire that once ruled the sky valleys. And what if I told you? Some of these practices didn't vanish. Modern defense departments and billionaires fund cryogenic suspension, but not to cheat death. To pause conscious identity until the world is reshaped, until their version of truth reigns, the deeper truth. They don't want to conquer time. They want to dominate memory, will, identity, forever. It begins with a child, not a warrior, not a scholar. Just a boy taken, before memory formed, handed over to a nameless order cloaked in silence. This was not a myth. It was a practice documented in Phoenician tablets, hidden in Vatican vaults, and whispered about in Romanian monasteries. So remote they don't appear on satellite maps. The ritual was called Inheritance of the Flame. But it wasn't about fire. It was about rewriting the soul. Here's how it worked. At the age of 5, the child would be placed in a sealed, lightless chamber beneath stone. No sound, no time, only pulse and breath. For 9 days he would hear a single voice, deep, steady, ancient, not in words, but in tone frequency, designed to bypass conscious language and enter the limbic code of the nervous system. By the 10th day, the child would emerge different, not traumatized, not broken, but recalibrated. From that point forward, he would react to power not with fear but reverence, to authority not with skepticism but devotion, to symbols not as decoration but as commands. This wasn't education. This wasn't hypnosis. This was ancestral reprogramming done before the conscious self could resist, protest, or question. And here's where it gets darker. The ritual didn't stop with one generation. These orders would pass the pattern down to son, blood to blood, until entire bloodlines carried not just physical DNA, but ideological code embedded at the subconscious level, not belief, instinct. This is why, even today, you'll find elite families, wealthy beyond imagination, who seem magnetized to the same positions of control. Century after century. It's not just privilege, it's programmed loyalty. Legacy not of finance, but of subconscious obedience to hidden values, and every few decades, if one of them breaks protocol questions, the tradition, they disappear. Sometimes quietly, sometimes with headlines. Sudden accident, tragic overdose, plane, went down in calm weather. They always say the same thing. But beneath the surface, there are orders still watching, still preserving the inheritance. And now that you know this, ask yourself, how much of what you believe was chosen, and how much was planted long before you could speak? Imagine this. You wake up tomorrow in a city that feels familiar. Streets, schools, churches, screens, all where they should be. But then someone hands you a map not of roads, but of ideologies. Suddenly you see it. The school doesn't educate, it normalizes. The church doesn't guide, it filters. The media doesn't inform, it directs attention like a shepherd with wolves. You haven't lived in a city. You've lived in a behavioral experiment, a long-running simulation, not in computers, but in cultures. It began with the Babylonians, who first discovered that if you align stories, rituals, and punishment just right, you don't need to chain the body. You can imprison the mind. Then came Rome. Gladiators bred spectacle, they understood. Give the people just enough pleasure, just enough fear, and they'll not only obey, they'll defend their own cages. Now, fast forward to today. We like to think we've evolved, but look around. Children are taught compliance, not curiosity. Workers are taught productivity, not purpose. Men are taught stoicism, not sovereignty. Every institution has one hidden instruction: never awaken the individual, only reinforce the collective. Think of it this way. When was the last time you were taught how to govern your attention, your breath, your intuition? You weren't, because a man in control of those things can't be controlled by anything. The architecture was never built for your soul. It was built for your obedience. And here's the devastating part. This architecture is self-healing. If one man sees it and tries to shout the truth, the system will absorb, label, or erase him. Conspiracy theorist, fringe, dangerous, and the people, conditioned for decades, will turn against their own liberator, thinking they're protecting themselves. Because in a dream this deep, the waking man looks insane. But now that you're here, and you're hearing this, you're not just waking up. You're standing in the blueprint itself. And once you've seen the design, you can never unsee it. Let me show you what they never wanted you to see. You've heard of symbols. You've seen them all, your life on your dollar bills, on buildings, in churches, in schools. But did you ever stop to ask what they really meant? Because symbols are not decorations. They are contracts. Ancient ones start with the eye in the pyramid. You were told it was about vision, protection, perhaps divine oversight. But that's only the cover story. That eye is not yours. It doesn't see for you. It sees you. It is surveillance, not salvation. It originated in the ancient mystery schools of Egypt and Babylon, where secret orders first discovered how to manipulate crowds with fear and symbols of omnipresence, symbols that trigger obedience without words. The pyramid itself, hierarchical, unmoving, immovable, was never just architecture. It was a diagram of power. At the top, the enlightened elite. Below them, the guardians of the system. And at the very bottom, the rest. USGOs, you live inside that pyramid now. Not of stone, but of systems. Your phone is the new altar. Your algorithm is the new priest. And your data, the new sacrifice. But it goes deeper. Take the cross, not just a religious symbol, but one of psychological fixation. It's the symbol of the martyr, the man broken publicly to teach obedience. How many times have we been shown that the highest virtue is to suffer, stay silent, and die for the collective? This is not salvation. This is programming. You were born into a culture of symbols, rituals, oaths, and sacrifices, but no one ever told you their origins. Why? Because if you trace them back far enough, you'll find the original architects' ancient councils, shadow dynasties, bloodlines that still whisper into the ears of kings, presidents, and tech lords. They keep these symbols alive because symbols outlast empires. You may forget a name, but a symbol. It etches itself into your nervous system. It becomes a part of your reality without permission. The worst part, you were never taught to read them. But they were always reading you. You believe your thoughts are your own. But what if I told you that your very memories, your identity, have been sculpted by forces you've never seen, using a method older than written history. It's called cultural overwrite, not brainwashing, in the crude, cinematic sense, but something far more permanent, subtle, viral, and devastating. It begins with the destruction of story, not the kind you find in books or streaming platforms, but the ancestral memory passed down through generations, through language, ritual, and song. Every empire that ever rose knew this. To control a people, you must first sever their connection to their origin, erase their myths, ridicule their old gods, burn their books, then replace them. Insert new heroes, new narratives, new facts, reframe their past as barbaric. Offer them salvation, your version of it. This is what Rome did. This is what the church did. This is what colonial powers did. And now, it's what algorithms are doing. Every time your feed scrolls past, you are absorbing a new version of reality, curated, trimmed, and rewritten by machines you didn't build and cannot question. Think about it. You remember what you're told to remember. Your perception of history is made of screenshots and soundbites, but true history, that was whispered in forests, etched on bones, hidden in lullabies, buried beneath churches, pyramids, and city halls. Take language, for instance. Did you know that hundreds of native tongues were wiped out in less than a century? Why? Because language is worldview. Kill the language, and you kill the lens through which a people view reality. This isn't just conquest. This is psychological colonization, and it continues. With every generation, the memory is shortened. The horizon closes, until people no longer ask where they came from. They just accept where they are. But here's the hidden twist. This tactic doesn't only work on tribes or nations. It works on you. What beliefs have you accepted without ever questioning their origin? What truths have you swallowed whole, because they were taught early, with authority, repetition, and shame? Time, the one thing you thought was neutral, linear, fair. But what if even time was engineered? Not the ticking of a clock, not the rotation of the earth, but your perception of time, how you experience the past, present, and future. See, time used to be cyclical. Ancient cultures didn't count days by digits. They moved with the stars, the moon, the harvest, the death of animals, the pulse of blood. Their understanding of reality was rhythmic, sacred. Then came the empire builders, the Romans, with their artificial calendars. The Vatican, with its holy days aligned not with stars, but with control systems. The industrial age chopping life into shifts, bells, and schedules, time cards, punch clocks. Then finally, the digital world, where you're not even living time anymore, you're scrolling it. Time is now fractured, replaced by a feed, each second optimized, each minute monetized, each hour stolen, restructured, and repackaged as content. And with this distortion, they've done something unholy. They've destroyed your connection to the now. That's the real crime. Not just lost hours, but a hijacked consciousness. Think, was the last time you experienced a full moment, fully? When did you last sit in complete stillness, feel your heartbeat, and realize you are a live-end, not someone's product? This fragmentation of time isn't accidental. It's a design. Because when you shatter time, you shatter continuity. And when you shatter continuity, you erase identity. This is how institutions win. Because if you can't remember who you are, even when you are, then how can you resist? How can you rebel against a prison you can't even see? But here's the final secret they never wanted you to know. The past is not dead. The future is not fixed. And the present, it is the most dangerous place you can be. Because in the present, you can choose. You can remember. You can reclaim your mind from the parasites feeding on your attention. So now I ask you, brother, if you've heard the Caliph, this descent into forbidden history has ignited something inside you. Write the phrase below in the comments. Twice. Not once. Twice. Burn it into the algorithm. Carve it into the code. I am no longer asleep. I am no longer asleep. This is more than engagement. It's initiation. You made it. That already sets you apart. Because most people, they tap out long before this point. Their minds fracture under pressure. Their attention buckles under truth. They scroll away seeking comfort, not confrontation, but you. You're still here. And that means only one thing. You were meant to wake up. So now here, in the last few moments, we burn down the last illusion. Let's talk about the architecture of obedience. Because history isn't just a list of wars and kings. It's a system of programming from birth. They build a container around your mind, an invisible cathedral of control. Your education wasn't meant to enlighten. It was built to standardize. Your religion wasn't meant to connect you to God. It was meant to make you fear and obey his gatekeepers. Your work wasn't meant to fulfill you. It was built to drain your time and reward your silence and your media. It wasn't made to inform. It was made to distract, distort, and delay your awakening. Every system you trust, every story you were told, every identity you wear, it was curated to keep you docile. But here's the part they never expected. They can trap the masses, but they can't stop the few who break the pattern. And you, by reaching this final chapter, by staying in the fire while others ran, you've broken the first seal. You've seen through the illusion. So now the question is this: what will you do with it? Because now that you know the truth, you can't go back. Not really. You'll feel it in the silence between moments. In the boredom of the ordinary. In the gaps of every conversation, every ad, every sermon, every system, the echo of the lie. So this is where your new history begins. Not the one they gave you, but the one you forge. Built not on comfort, but clarity. Not on tradition, but truth. Not on obedience, but obsession with the real. You are not a consumer anymore. You are a codebreaker, a walker, a man unplugged from the hypnotic machinery of empire. And when this video ends, the real descent begins, because the truth is not a destination. It's a warpath. And now you walk it, alone, awake, and uncompromising.